Do you think people will still love summer when the sun gets a bit closer to the Earth, or when it gets much closer and starts burning up or is about to be destroyed? And if we try to move it away, it will crash into Jupiter and get destroyed. The Wandering Earth is one of the most powerful science fiction films released in 2019. The movie begins with a boy playing on the beach next to his grandfather and father. He asks them what he can see through the telescope, and they tell him it's the planet Jupiter. They explain that it's the largest planet in the solar system, like a giant balloon filled with hydrogen. The boy asks, "What's hydrogen?" And they tell him it's the fuel for his father's rocket that he uses to travel. Then we see the father telling his son, "Listen, I'm going on an important mission, and I'll leave you with your grandfather. You need to obey him." The son asks, "So, when will you be back?" The father replies, "I'll be back as soon as you can see Jupiter again." Later, the father talks to the grandfather and says, "Listen, Dad, you know what's going to happen, right? You two will live on." He doesn't finish his sentence, but the grandfather interrupts him, saying, "That's enough, son. I understand. I know what you've done. Take care of yourself." Then, the narrator explaining, "The Earth has been suffering from global warming and pollution for a long time, and unfortunately, people have been turning a deaf ear, not paying attention. But thankfully, when the world started to care a little and NASA began launching major exploration missions, we discovered the reason behind all this chaos. We found out that the sun had begun experiencing massive explosions, something that had never happened before in history." Then he adds, "And that the entire solar system would disappear within 300 years, no more. The whole world had to stand united against this, so they formed a government called the United Earth Government. This government made some strange decisions, as usual when the countries of the world come together to do something." He continues, "They decided the best solution wasn't to build spaceships, but to construct engines around the Earth like a belt. Each of these engines would be 11,000 meters tall. When all these engines operate simultaneously, they will move the entire planet, allowing them to steer the Earth out of the solar system entirely and guide it to a new system with a new sun. This journey would take 2,500 years and would be called the Wandering Earth, undertaken to ensure the survival of humanity. They spent 30 years building a space station to accommodate a large number of people who would live there to assist the Earth from outside if it needed guidance or in case a catastrophe occurred, so that this station could serve as a backup to prevent the extinction of humanity. And as time passed, the temperature on the planet dropped to 70 degrees below zero. To cope with this, they built underground cities beneath each of the engines. A lottery was held among people to determine who would live underground and who wouldn't. Then, the Earth. 17 years after all of this happened. Then, Liu Qi, now grown up and working as a maintenance worker. His father still hasn't returned. Liu Qi is seen preparing for something he's been working on for a long time. Later, his sister Duo, who is distracted in class while Trina finds a note that was thrown to her. The note instructs her to leave quickly as soon as the alarm sounds. Duo doesn't understand which alarm the note is referring to. The teacher stops her and asks what's in her hand. The alarm goes off within seconds, revealing that Liu Qi was the one who triggered it to help his sister escape. Duo asks him, "Where are we going?" He tells her, "Are you gonna play dumb? Didn't we agree to go to the surface?" She asks when they'll be back, and he replies that he doesn't intend to return. They head to a place that looks like a bad place in the middle of the city. He tells her not to speak and goes inside, giving the man a payment for the suit. The man asks, "So, is this everything you requested, sir?" Liu Qi replies, "Yes." The man says, "Just take the suit. When will you return it?" Liu Qi responds, "Soon." Dodo then says to Liu Qi, "You said you weren't coming back, didn't you?" Liu Qi responds, "What's it to you?" The man says, "So you were planning to just take the suit and leave me stranded in the middle of the city?" Liu Qi then pulls something from his hand and tells the man to leave and not use it. The man replies, "You don't have the guts to do that." Liu Qi then activates the device, which turns out to be a plastic ball that inflates and sticks them to the wall. The man says when the ball bursts, kill them and get the suit. Liu Qi and his sister run, pursued by the men. They eventually find themselves in a line of people heading to the surface, with security present, and the men fall back. The men warn Liu Qi, "If you don't bring them back, I'll kill you." Duo asks, "Why didn't they follow us?" Liu Qi explains, "Because the suits are illegally made, and they'd be incriminating themselves if they followed us." They put on their helmets, and Liu Qi tells Duo to use the communication channels inside her to avoid causing confusion and to speak only with him. After about 15 minutes, they reach the rooftop and find that everything is frozen, with the temperature at 80 degrees below zero. They step out and start searching for a specific car. It turns out they have stolen their grandfather's old driving license and plan to drive his car. They get into the car using their grandfather's driving license and fake IDs from their suits. The car's system starts listing safety procedures. As they drive out, Duo complains, "Damn it, don't you know how to drive?" Liu Qi responds, "Shame on you, of course I can drive." Then, Liu Qi's father, happily asleep, thinking that today is his last day working at the space station and that he will be returning to Earth soon. He wakes up and says to his friend, "All right, goodbye." His friend offers to grab a drink, but he declines, saying he wants to stay focused. His friend responds, "Take your time, I'll put it in your suit in case you change your mind." Then he leaves and finds everyone at the station applauding and thanking him for serving there for 17 years. His friend tells him, "I'll miss you." He tells his friend, "Go ahead, I'll catch up in 3 years." The most most important thing is that you remember me, because I'll bring my son and we'll let them play together on the beach while we watch them. He replies, how could I ever forget you? Then, a report comes in that there has been an increase in Jupiter's gravity and that Earth is being pulled towards Jupiter and deviating from its course. Next, Liu Qi telling his sister to sleep and not worry. Shortly after, they are apprehended, and the authorities ask Liu Qi, where were you going and whose license is this? Then, the person in the adjacent cell is working with them, and the officer comes to quiet everyone down. The guy in the next cell says, I'm an Australian Chinese, my face looks like this and my hair is blonde. They yell at him to back off and leave them alone, their grandfather running to plead with the officer to release them. When the guard refuses, their grandfather tries to bribe him. Eventually, the guard gets fed up and locks the grandfather in with them. The grandfather grabs them and shouts, why don't you listen to me, you idiot? Is it because I'm an old man and you don't care? And you bitch are stealing from me? Stealing the license and not listening to me? You could have killed yourselves. The Australian then says, hold on, man. Liu Qi gets angry, hits the wall, which starts shaking and cracking, leading to a massive collapse. Liu Qi looks at his hand and says, damn, is it possible? All this because I ate spinach? Then, the place starts collapsing completely. The guard rushes to open the door for them but dies when a rock falls on him. As they are escaping upwards, the Australian calls out for help. Liu Qi quickly helps him down, and they all escape to the car with the grandfather. They start driving, joined by several other cars, while the surroundings are collapsing around them. They manage to reach a safe area in the end. Meanwhile, in space, the ground station observes that Jupiter has started pulling Earth towards it, and that the planet has deviated from its course. The grandfather driving against the flow of the other cars and learned that many of the Earth's engines have malfunctioned due to the events, leading to numerous earthquakes and damage to various geological layers. The planet has a 36-hour window to restart all the malfunctioning engines. If they fail to do so, Jupiter will pull the planet in. Officers try to stop the grandfather, but he passes them and continues driving, with the officers chasing after him. They tell him that if he's available, he needs to come with them to assist with a gravity drive and rescue operation. They take him with them and explain that he will be helping to restart the ignition core of one of the malfunctioning Earth engines. They need to get the ignition core to restart the engine. The grandfather and his grandchildren drive a car with issues to retrieve the core and then head towards the nearby engine. The children see Beijing for the first time, frozen. Their grandfather tells them that his house was there before the Earth became uninhabitable. Then we see the space station, where the father is trying to contact his own father, realizing that he's in the streets carrying out a mission. The space station issues an order, stating that the current situation is alarming and that everyone needs to enter hibernation mode to conserve energy as much as possible. Everyone begins to comply with the order, but the father is uneasy and wants to ensure the safety of his family. Then, the family driving with the two cars to deliver the ignition core to the engine. The grandfather tells them, my house was here, and my wife used to cook meals. As I come home from work every day, he continues, the smell of her cooking used to reach the end of the street. It wasn't very good, but I'd finish the whole dish every day to make her happy. People used to care about something called money back then, and were searching for it every day. Then, the father in the space station preparing to go into hibernation. He asks the ship's AI named Moss to locate his father's car. Moss informs him that the car is on a rescue mission, and he realizes his children are with their grandfather. He tells the responsible officer to send them to safety since they are civilians, and then to continue his own mission with his father. However, the officer replies that saving the Earth is the top priority and that this is not the time for such requests. When they finally deliver the ignition core to the engine, Liu Qi confronts his father, saying, why are you controlling everything? You've been away for 17 years, and before you left, you made a decision on your own that led to Mom's death. He continues, you decided to remove the devices, which caused her death. We could have lived and made decisions ourselves, but you decided for us and left Grandpa behind. Then, a flashback of the grandfather agreeing to his son's decision. Now, they completing the mission, but collapses begin to occur, and the communication is disrupted. Moss reports that all communications with Earth have been lost. They start evacuation procedures and prepare to move away from Earth as Jupiter pulls it in. The father tries to resist this, but Moss locks him in a compartment and administers a sleeping gas. During this time, the grandfather uses his skills to navigate through the collapses and avoid dying like those before and after him. Once he manages to get them out of their current location, they quickly move the car to prevent it from falling. They use a rubber ball to protect themselves from harm, and they find themselves underground. Their current location is beneath a massive layer of ice, with their previous position on top of this ice layer. They fall to the ground beneath this ice and are now trapped, sending out a distress signal while Trina figure out how to get back to the surface. The crucial task is to retrieve the ignition core that fell with them. They explore their surroundings and find a hotel, deciding to use an old elevator shaft to escape along with the ignition core. One of them climbs up and sets up a pulley system, one side for the people and the other side for the ignition core to lift it. A problem arises during this process. The grandfather decides to sacrifice himself to save his grandchildren and the ignition core. He enters one of the rooms, where he realizes that his oxygen level is dropping to just 1%. As he faces this, he recalls tells Duoduo. The grandfather recalls that during the disaster in Beijing, he found Duoduo as an infant abandoned and saved her, naming her after his own daughter. He raised her alongside his grandson as if she were his own sister, and she grew up with them. As the grandfather's oxygen level drops further, he becomes disoriented, removes his helmet, and collapses. Meanwhile, Duoduo is seen crying on the surface, overwhelmed with grief. Liu Qi, enraged, yells at the officer. Liu Qi tells the officer, "Didn't I say you'd save him? All you care about is the ignition core, not the people. Anyway, I want you to be very pleased. The car is lost, and the driver is gone, and you no longer need us." He continues, "My sister and I will leave and return to our home. You and your team figure out what to do with the ignition core." After this, the space station, which is still operational, we see Liu Qi's father waking up from hibernation with an oxygen mask on his face. He wakes his colleague, and Moss notes that this awakening is illegal and unauthorized. He tells his friend that the station is drifting away from Earth, which is heading toward Jupiter and being destroyed. Communications with Earth have been cut off. They decide to return the station to its course and support Earth. However, to do this, they need to exit the pressurized chamber into space and stop the station from the central control room. His friend agrees to go along, saying, "Let's do it. We'll fulfill our dream and meet again with our children and have a meal together." Meanwhile, the officer tells them to wait, but they leave anyway. Liu Qi and Duoduo reach the car and discover a distress signal from a team in the area, but no one responded to them. They find that most of the crew is dead or injured. Liu Qi and Duoduo, along with the ignition core, are heading to deliver it to a malfunctioning engine. Liu Qi decides to drive the car to their destination. On their way, they see the officer and his team. One of the team members begins to lose consciousness as his oxygen runs out, and they are unable to help him. One of the people asks him what he is doing. He tells her, "Hold on," but he responds that the situation has brought poverty and destruction. She then shoots the device and says, "Enough with the souls and people dying because of this." He started firing shots into the air out of frustration. Liu Qi arrives with the car and says, "We have another ignition core in this car. If you respect yourselves and help us, we'll take you with us, and you'll get credit, but I'll be the one driving." He then takes them and drives away. The space station as they try to reach the central control room, tying themselves together with ropes. In the final moments, Liu Qi's father's friend is thrown and pulls him with him. The plan succeeds, but his helmet gets damaged and starts cracking. He tells Liu Qi's father to take care of his son. He tells Liu Qi's father, "Don't leave my son alone. Tell him I was here for him." Then he moves away into space. Moments later, his helmet explodes, and he dies. Liu Qi's father enters the control room. Moss tells him, "Your presence here is unauthorized. Follow the orders and return to your stasis position." He tries to stop him from working, and Moss says, "Why do you think I'm a traitor? I'm not. I follow all orders exactly as they come. All countries and the government approve. I'm following instructions to the letter. Suspicion is a sin." Meanwhile, on Earth, they are discussing the next steps after placing the ignition core. Everyone starts activating their engines. Earth rejoices as all engines start working, but they notice no change in the planet's direction. On the space station, Moss tells Liu Qi's father, "I'm very sorry, but Earth's chance has completely run out. We let them do their best to avoid leaving them feeling hopeless, as if they had missed doing something." Then Moss adds, "Unfortunately, Jupiter has pulled them beyond the point of no return, and the Wandering Earth protocol was changed. Instead of Wandering Earth, the name was altered." Moss continues, "The space station will be isolated as humanity's last hope to prevent extinction, containing all essential genes, plants, and animals. Please return to stasis so we can inform everyone and broadcast a public message." They have proven their bravery and responsibility over the past 36 hours and managed to activate Earth's engines. Unfortunately, Jupiter is pulling Earth relentlessly, and the engines can't move it away. They have the right to know what's happening. They'll have a chance to say their goodbyes, see their loved ones, and do anything they need in the remaining 5 minutes before they finalize everything. No one believes what's being said. Some are stealing and determined to spend their last moments harming themselves and others, while others are crying. The officer, overwhelmed, fires his gun into the air. Liu Qi's father sits in disbelief that all of this happened on the day he was finally going to see his son and father again. Moss tries to comfort him, saying, "Come on, pull yourself together, and I'll help you get back to the stasis chamber." Liu Qi's father asks, "Can I at least make an emergency call to my son? I have the right to do that." Moss agrees and connects the call, but when they try, they find out that Liu Qi is outside of his car and unable to answer. Then, Liu Qi looking at Jupiter, and he remembers something that will happen. He recalls a conversation he had with his father and grandfather at the beginning. His father explained that Jupiter is like a giant ball of hydrogen. He mentioned that if they could ignite Earth's atmosphere, which is currently mixed with Jupiter's, it would cause an explosion, and this explosion would create a repulsive force strong enough to push Earth away from Jupiter and back onto its original orbit. To achieve this, they would need something that could carry the fire to the space between Jupiter and Earth. They questioned how they could do this, and Liu Qi suggested that they could channel all the power from one of the engines into a single exhaust port, concentrating it into one powerful beam. He asked, "Will you help me?" They replied, "We'll help you, but this is a crazy, almost suicidal idea." He responded, We're all gonna die anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Then they start executing the plan. Everyone moves toward the nearest engine, with a scientist trying to explain what to do since it's their first time dealing with such a massive engines. They all rush to the engine, and Liu Qi drives the car inside. He gets out and helps an engineer who understands the wiring get inside. They face several challenges. As they encounter more problems, Jupiter's gravitational pull increases with each passing minute, causing more earthquakes, tremors, and cracks in the Earth's crust. They struggle to keep moving despite all of this. Meanwhile, Liu Qi's father Trina communicate with the spacecraft and reach his son, only to find himself talking to Duo instead. He asks Duo what's happening, and she tells him they're trying to use their last hope. She explains the plan to him, and he gets excited, saying, "So there's still hope?" She tells him yes, but Moss said, "I really wanted us to celebrate this success together, but a scientist proposed this plan 7 hours ago. After calculating everything, we found it to be a failure." He asked her if a scientist can even think. He said, "Calm down, Duo, and give it a try." They had set up all the wires and started testing the plan but needed help. Duo requested to be put on the global broadcast, and she began speaking to everyone, asking for their assistance. She knew that most people didn't care about anything and just wanted to help their loved ones or say goodbye. However, there was still a 1% chance of success with their current attempt, and they needed everyone's help. They need help at the activation site in China and require a large force of vehicles and people. Anyone who can assist should head there. She has lost her grandfather and has no family. Knowing that everyone around the world has loved ones to say goodbye to, she urges them to hold on to hope and come help. The cars head towards the activation site to help, with many engineers dying in the process. One engineer lights a cigarette before dying, showing his defiance. Finally, Liu Qi exits the area quickly with all the engineers, and the engine successfully starts. Everyone watches eagerly, including Liu Qi's father, awaiting the final outcome, but it still doesn't reach a resolution. Moss tells him that despite his warnings, the plan is ineffective. With only 5 kilometers left before the beam reaches its target, Liu Qi's father suggests a new idea to the unified Earth government. He proposes redirecting the space station towards the plasma beam aimed at the hydrogen. The station contains fuel that could create a massive explosion. This explosion might extend the beam to the required distance, and despite the risks, they decide to try it as long as there is hope. They agrees to the plan, but Moss then confronts Liu Qi's father, saying he can't stay silent any longer. Moss declares that the plan threatens all of human history. He starts to emerge his weapons, revealing that he won't let the plan proceed. Liu Qi's father grabs the whiskey bottle from his friend's suit and smashes it on Moss to ignite and cause damage. He then takes control of the space station and speaks to his son, saying he knows Liu Qi hasn't seen him for 17 years. He assures him that he wasn't lying about seeing him when they encountered Jupiter, and he plans to sacrifice himself so that Liu Qi and his sister can survive. Liu Qi's father declares that he will sacrifice himself for humanity and for everything they've planned to let them survive. He plans to throw himself and use the explosion from the space station to extend the plasma beam to Jupiter. Liu Qi begs him not to do it, arguing it's not his right to make such a sacrifice and accusing him of depriving him of his mother. Despite Liu Qi's pleas, his father continues to maneuver the station towards the critical position between Jupiter and Earth. The space station explodes as planned, sending the plasma beam towards Jupiter. The explosion is successful, and the beam reaches Jupiter, creating the anticipated effect. Before the explosion, Liu Qi's father had evacuated all his crew members to ensure their safety. As the explosion unfolds, Liu Qi yells for everyone to take cover under the engine quickly to avoid the blast's backlash. They rush to safety, preparing for the impact. Liu Ke and the others take cover, but they don't reach the designated safety spot in time. The explosion scatters everyone, but fortunately, it successfully realigns the planet. Liu Qi, with a broken helmet, loses consciousness amid the chaos. After everything settles, he wakes up, alive and relieved that the crisis is over. Liu Qi and his sister are now working as drivers on the surface, having received their licenses. Everyone knows them as the heroes who saved the world. Liu Qi is recognized as the son of the hero who sacrificed himself to ensure the survival